Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of this painting and drawing series. So we're gonna hop right back into it. So we're taking our sketch from the last video and we're gonna bring it all the way to final. It's kind of a crazy path that I take. So it's definitely pretty interesting to see that it's not always a straight shot from point A to point B. And I'll kind of explain my thought process on how we end up where we do in the end. If you didn't see the last video, I'm gonna put a link to it up right at the top there, and so you can check that out and see that process right from scratch. So let's not waste any more time and hop right to the commentary. Okay, so we're jumping in to exactly where I left off in the last video. And again, if you haven't seen the last one and you wanna see this drawn from scratch, I'll have a link in the description below as well. So basically, one of the first things I wanna do, and you can kind of look at my layers on the side as well, is I'm creating an overlay layer to just block in some kind of local color ideas. I'm basically trying to go as fast as I do on the sketch without worrying about it too much and not diving into any detail. It's something we can keep changing as we keep working on the project. And basically it's just bouncing around like crazy, trying to figure out, I'm like, do I want to do blue for the outfit? Do I want to do red? What type of color palette do I actually want to work with? I'm not super sure, and a lot of this piece is me just kind of figuring it out as I go, right? And how I usually use my overlay layers and my multiply layers to apply color, usually if it's above like 50% value to like highlights, I like to use overlay layer as it feels like it's kind of like adding color, adding lightness to it. And then if I want to darken it with color, like 50% below, I will then use like a multiply layer. And usually like those are the only two layers I'm really generally going to use besides the normal one. So one of the craziest things about this drawing is I really was not sure where I wanted to go with it. You know, sometimes a lot of artists have like a larger plan. They know exactly what they want to do when they start. Sometimes I do a lot of drawings and paintings where I'm just figuring the entire thing out as I go. And I think that is super awesome for artists to do. It's something that I actually super enjoy. Like some people might find it frustrating to be kind of lost in it, but I kind of like that to live in that space. And so like most paintings, to get a real feel for where I wanted to go, I did want to spend a little bit more work on the face so that can give me some ideas of her personality and where she might go as a character. And sometimes if it's too messy or too muddy, it's hard for me to make kind of informed decisions on it. And so I'm using D Greco Main as usual for my brush. Oh, so right there real quick is me using a multiply layer and basically just taking like a middle value type of red, placing it over it and just kind of dropping the opacity and just knocking the whole thing back. It's almost like you're doing a wash, you know, or like some type of like glazing technique if you were working with traditional media. It's just pushing everything back and so I can rebuild on top of it. It's something I do sometimes if the piece feels like it's getting a little too blown out. So like I was saying, I'm doing all this with DG Main. I'll have a link to my brush pack as usual down below. And I do almost all my rendering with it. It's basically a square chalk brush and I'm just super comfortable with it. And it just seems to handle sketching, painting, and just to get the refinement that I'm always looking for. And so there's a lot of cross comparisons I'm doing now. I'm trying to fix up some parts of it, trying to, you know, get the ear in the right place, move some things around that might have been a little bit messed up from the sketch. So one thing you'll see me do a lot with this rendering is I'm constantly looking at the shape design of kind of the negative space and the silhouette around her. I want to make sure the edges of the hair feel good in contrast to like the shoulder, to the back of the neck, to the front. That stuff I find super important. And so, you know, I do try to flip the canvas quite often. Try not to go too crazy, but I do flip it quite a bit. And I'm really trying to find those shapes. As you notice also, I do stay pretty zoomed out. Like this would be an easy stage to get really zoomed in and just start detailing the face like crazy. But I still want to keep the camera out. So I'm still getting a general idea of how the silhouette of her hair and head contrast to the body. And so a great way is just to keep the camera zoomed out. So I thought about actually zooming in the camera, you know, post edit, just so you guys can see a little bit closer on the actual brush strokes. But I think it's important to be able to see that I'm actually keeping it out quite a bit. Or I could easily get a little bit closer. And so always feel free to move shapes around. One thing that I see a lot of artists do, and I used to have the same problem, especially if you have a lot of hair over where the ear and the face connects, to not have the ear in the right spot. So always try to remember where that ear is connected and where it sits like behind the jawbone to make sure it's in the right spot. So basically it's the same thing. I'm trying to carve around the hair to find a shape that I like. That is something that actually changes quite a bit in this. I kept coming back to the piece. There was a lot that wasn't sitting right. I didn't really like the curve on the top of her hair, on top of the head. It didn't feel dynamic enough. It wasn't interesting enough. And maybe it was coming up too high than coming down. And so I really just want to give you all the kind of the exact thoughts that go through my head, because those are the type of things that you can know to look for when you're working on your own artwork on where to make changes. I also thought her head was starting to get like it was cocked to the side. It felt like a little bit too much for what I was going for here. So always, feel free, just lasso the whole head. If you want Control-Shift-C, you'll copy everything on that layer and below it. And then I just copy, Control-V, paste it on top, warp it, move it around. And as you can see, my layers do build up quite fast. I've always been a little crazy with my layers, but they're usually kind of just nonsense. I just have a mental habit of creating layers as I paint. I am just squashing and flattening the painting anyway, since I kind of just always paint on top of things. So I still found at this stage it was a good time to try different ideas, different shapes, try that thing on the forehead, and really kind of see where we want to go. We're not stuck with anything. We can constantly move everything around. And so even with these little hairs, curly Q things that are coming down, it's really trying to find little shapes that work and are kind of accentuating the composition around the face. I know during this time, and I can try to give you some of my thoughts as I was painting it, I was struggling a bit with the kind of mood and vibe I was going for face-wise, right? I wanted this kind of like pronounced chin at first. Then at one point, it felt like it was a little bit too much. And then I was also grappling with the idea that we kind of got ourselves into kind of an idea with both eyes are covered with her hair, which I thought was cool on the initial sketch. But I think I was struggling with the idea that it is tough to have them both covered, where I think so much of a character's personality is shown through the eyes, and at least having one eye shown. So that is something tackling forward. I will fully paint out the hair and then readdress that so we can actually get her eye going and fix it. And I mentioned this in the video before. If something is bothering you or not sitting right, it is worth the time to sit down, figure out what the issue is, and kind of repaint back into it. I knew there was something bothering me. Maybe there was like certain shapes behind the hair because I was always kind of painting in between the hair itself. And this is what we do right here. It was worth just completely scrubbing right over it. Let's figure out where the eye is, where I want it to be, the eyelids, the eyebrows, everything. And then let's go from there. Then let's refigure out the hair so it works better for us. And I'm really glad I ended up going that direction. It just felt better to me. And I felt like it was kind of fitting the character that was starting to evolve in front of us. And I actually, you can see before I warped and pushed back some of the hair behind her head, I just felt like it was fitting the shape better. Just like I said, I'm constantly obsessed with that kind of silhouette and shape design around the character. Super important. Keep pushing and pulling, even if it takes a while. Sometimes you hit it on the first go. Sometimes it takes 30 goes, and this was one of them where it took a little bit to get there, but that's okay. It almost kind of mimics feedback if you're in a studio setting or working with an art lead and art director. Maybe you just tell yourself you just got some feedback, something wasn't working, so you're spending the time to trying to figure it all out. Like I said, there's a lot of like shapes and colors I'm kind of just jotting into the piece that's kind of giving me more ideas as we progress further. And like I said before in the previous video, is that we didn't have to be super set on a final design while working on the black and white. So much of this I can tweak and figure out in the color. So those initial overlay layers we did just gave like a kind of little color wash on top so we can start. But now we're really just like eye dropping and picking exact colors, starting pretty muted with it. And then we can push the saturation of colors in certain areas that we deem important, right? You usually get like the shoulders, chest, face, really key elements that you really want to push that color and contrast. So that's what the viewer is looking at first. And the face isn't done, but it was sitting in a place that was feeling a little bit better to me. So I felt like I could move on and really kind of start fleshing out her outfit. Let's really dive in and figure out what that sketch we made before and what it actually is. And then we can go back to the face, back to the outfit. But it was good to move on. I felt like I had spent quite a bit of time on the face already. And so we're actually going back in, refiguring out the sketch of where she was as far as this like time gauntlet thing she has in, something that kind of controls it. And then kind of bringing in some of those colors. So I'm starting to establish that I kind of have this like blue, green, golds, like gold trim on things that exists. And how can we bring that into kind of a consistent outfit or uniform? I'm really kind of just moving around the piece quite a bit. I'm not super focused on one area. I'm not going to finish one area, move on to the rest. And a lot of this was like, I always love that kind of like aqua teal color mixed with like yellows and pinks. And so I just kind of went back in and splashed in a little kind of saturated pink areas in her hair, just kind of nonsensically to kind of make things pop a little bit. It just adds a little bit kind of a graphic feel to the piece that I always enjoy. So this is the same thing. I'm actually just trying to figure out kind of shapes that work for some of her design and, see where it can goes. And then there's some other like things that I start to figure out as we go. And usually we had a lot of these like straps and belts that were kind of this brown leather, color. And I know at one point I started to feel like it really wasn't fitting of this uniform or outfit coming to be, and to me, it just felt like a little bit more generic to have this kind of like brown leathery strap across her chest. And we already taken that from her waist and kind of built this into her outfit already. So that's something just like her face. I was like, all right, let's just paint it out. Let's refigure it out to make sure the anatomy is kind of sitting well with us also. So at the same time, I can kind of start working on her back arm also, kind of see how it might be working. A lot of these too, I always love to have a character be asymmetrical too, if possible, especially for major characters. I think, the asymmetry helps quite a bit. And so just kind of building up that language on what could be happening with her arm. And so you saw with her pants before, I talked about if I just want to add some quick color, but it was kind of like of a darker value. I usually use a multiply layer, and you have to be careful with your multiply and overlay layers. If you go too saturated, too strong with it, you can really blow out the color and everything with your piece. So just try to be subtle with it, work it in small stages, have fun building it up slowly, because then you're constantly want to contrast what's working with the value and colors next to it and around the piece. So this right here, another example of the multiply layer. I just have like a middle value, kind of bluish gray, popping on top and just kind of airbrush soften the bottom of it. The biggest reason for this is I just wanted a lot more pop because she has such a light hair. I didn't really want light hair on a light background. I wanted to get some more kind of high contrast towards the top. And so on that layer, I just kind of erased out kind of where her head was. I'm not being like super clean with it, but also that kind of, it almost like gives it like a little bit of that glow, around her hair too. Whereas like it's kind of a little faded. So it's not like a really sharp line, but it kind of has that kind of angelic glow feel to it, which is kind of nice. And also you can kind of see, I kind of almost have like a more generic lighting structure where there's just a kind of front facing light source, towards you or the camera. I just want to feel like her form is coming forward. I think that's something I look at when I look at a lot of artists' portfolio, is always a reminder of like, let's just try to get a real structure to the character and make sure the forms and the shapes feel like they're living kind of in a 3D space and they're just coming towards you. We don't have to worry about crazy lighting scenarios or rim light. Let's just have it make it feel like it lives in a 3D space. And that's really what we're going for. And so a lot of this, as we color, we're still making a ton of decisions on what the structure and what her outfit and everything is going to be. All the little pieces, what makes sense, what doesn't. I was really, at this stage, I feel like really finding this cool green and gold option for her, where it's more of an official type of uniform instead of this kind of ragtag thing maybe we were thinking before. And so I was really, really feeling that vibe. And this is usually at the stage of a painting where I start to get really excited and it's hard to stop painting, which I'm sure most people know is always one of the best stages to be in, when all you want to do is just live in the painting for a few hours every night, during the day, and then you can't wait to hop back into it. That's always a great stage to be at. So same thing. It's really just kind of finding what the gold trim is, getting like a little bounce color in there, not going too crazy. Yeah, I think it would have been real easy to think of a glowing blue portal behind her and just start adding like crazy blue rim light all over the place. I don't think it was super necessary. I think I just wanted the objects to sit there. You can do way too much rim light and it really can start to flatten the image. So you have to be careful. And one thing I noticed, I really was starting to like this kind of like light blue, teal color of these markings on her. And one great technique I actually do quite a bit. So you think about those markings on her arm. I just had like one layer, used the, DG main. I just kind of blocked in some geometric shapes. Just control shift a layer. So you're just selecting what you just painted. And I just grab an airbrush, right? Make it pretty large. And I just swipe one lighter color of that same version, a lot more white than saturation, and just drag it right down where the spaces where they seem like they would come forward. Usually like tattoos and stuff like that, they reflect light a bit differently. So I usually like to add a lot more kind of a white to it than more of a saturated color. And it almost gives it like this extra sheen, right? So it doesn't actually feel exactly like your skin, like there's something underneath it, more of that ink or something else. And it kind of makes it pop a little bit more off the skin. So really simple technique. It honestly took like a minute and a half, but I thought it had like a really cool effect applying that on her skin. And you can also see I did remove the belt on the chest, and so we can actually figure out her outfit like a little bit more. Trying to spread out to the rest of the piece here. This ended up being more of an illustration than I probably initially thought, where I thought we were just going to paint a character, but I was just kind of having fun. I just want to go with it. And I really didn't mind diving a little deeper for one of our first videos back. So I brought the navigator. You are welcome to bring this up if you're zoomed in and you still want to keep an eye on the whole piece. I actually used the navigator quite a lot when I was doing work for Magic the Gathering. Having that kind of small window to kind of see the entire piece and to see the piece at a distance, which is super important for if you're working for any TCG like Magic the Gathering, that it reads really well small. That's super important. So I just want to kind of bring that up for a little bit and show you that's a good example if you really want to get an eye on the whole piece without kind of zooming out like constantly. It's a good way to do it. And if you have a second monitor, you can just put it up on the other one, and it's really great. And I knew at one point I still had to tackle the rest of the piece. I brought the canvas down a little bit. We want to get her foot in there. I didn't really want her completely floating. So I thought that was important. And I'm still making new decisions as we go. Maybe part of her hair is actually on the left side quite a bit longer, in these like certain sections. I always really enjoy that look, and I think it's very cool. And so I did want to get some of that in there. Not getting too crazy. We could go so much further as far as like detail and trim and these kind of like ornate designs all over our outfit, and that's something that could be explored in the future. But I just want to keep more kind of like simple trims, simple color. And one thing I do try to do with my color, and I remember giving this feedback quite a bit as well, is instead of just green outfit, right? Or just gold trim, what are these like small, subtle colors that you can add to it that just give it like a lot more interest? If it's like a little bit of these like browns and a little bit of like blues in the shadow areas, with the gold, like we have these like really saturated spots of orange, and I think later I do add like a little bit of like really cool blue to parts of the metal as well, just to kind of soak in a little bit of the background in that light that might be hitting it. But it's good to get like a lot of like little subtle colors in there. Will help your piece a lot. Instead of just like, this is a green outfit with dark green shadows and light green highlights. That's always something to keep in mind. It's almost like a good mental checklist to try as you're painting. So I encourage you all to kind of try that out and see what works. So right here, I was actually thinking, you know what? I kind of miss that staff. And I was putting just a line in there to see where I could possibly put it. I felt like if I put it on her back hand again, half of it's going to be going through the portal. I didn't want to just show half of it. I was like, you know what? It could be kind of neat to have it in her front arm going downwards. And I did angle it a little bit. So much of the pixel portal is completely straight down, and I didn't want her staff to feel like it was lining up with it. So I did need to tilt it a little bit, and I changed her hand to kind of be holding it. And this was kind of the staff I had in my head from earlier. So we just did some quick color and shapes on it to kind of block it in and kind of figure out where we go. And right here, I'm basically sketching in color like we did with the black and white. I'm just saying zoomed out, and I'm just color picking color and splashing it down all over the place, trying to make sure certain things read, that there's like high contrast around her body. Do we have more kind of like dark blue vignette fields around the corners? And I'm just really kind of playing it out. You know, what is important to me in a piece. You know, I actually thought the green towards the pants right there was like, it felt like so much green from top to bottom. It was almost felt like she was wearing like this type of jumpsuit or something. So I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to break it up somehow. Like the green kind of faded down into gray. You know, you're not stuck on anything. That's like always the coolest part about it. It's like, does it always have to make total sense? No. In these sketches, especially ones like these that are not actually going to a team member to get modeled or anything, just go crazy, have super fun with it. You know, just play with what ideas work and what might not work. I was a little concerned that she looked like she didn't have the her back leg. So I want to make sure I got the idea of it coming through the portal, even if it was subtle, just so it didn't look like one leg was lopped off or something. So this gives me a chance to kind of dive around and see what's reading and see what's not reading. And I was actually trying some things with the hand there. We had lost the key idea from before, so I was like, maybe she's holding the keychain in her opposite hand. It didn't really work. And that was one thing too, that like if one of those ideas isn't working, maybe the keys just isn't a good fit anymore. I thought, I was like, you know what? I think we have enough cool ideas that the key idea might be a little confusing when she seems like she has a lot of tech with her staff and her bracer right now, that maybe that's enough. We don't have to throw in like 30 ideas into one piece. You know, I picture this top staff that it kind of like rotates around this crystal, kind of arcs energy down. And maybe that kind of like shoots and energizes into her gauntlet bracer. And then she can slam it on the ground and creates a portal. that's where I'm going with it right now. And I think that'd be actually a pretty cool idea. So like I said, we're creating stories, we're creating characters as we're drawing and painting. And this is, I think, a great part of any character artist. If you're looking to get into the industry, is I find myself completely getting in the headspace of the character, who they are, what their ambitions are. You know, I think it's a complete vibe check on how you render your character and how you present your character. You know, because you're going to be showing that rest of the team or other people, and you really want to sell your idea. You know, I've always stood by that, even at any studio that I've been at, is that you always have to really be selling your idea. Don't leave too many gaps expecting somebody else to kind of fill it all in, you know, and see what's working and see what's not working, and hopefully, and think that they can get to where you are. You know, really try to fire it home, you know, and really get that idea across, I think is a major help. Yeah, so, you know, I stay pretty zoomed out. So I'm just cleaning things up and seeing where my values are and where like a good contrast is. I'm still trying to paint this weird pixely thing. I didn't want to do like a pixel filter type thing. I wanted to feel like actual paint. So it didn't have to be perfect. It was just, a cool painted idea. I didn't want it to seem too digitally made, if that makes sense. I still wanted everything to feel like it was made by hand, which I think has a more visceral and gritty feel to it that people can connect to a little bit more. When things can become too overly digital or too overly filtered, people feel very disconnected to it. There's a big reason why most AI art, people look at it for like a second. They don't care about it at all because there's no grit, there's no soul to it whatsoever, right? So it becomes almost like valueless. It exits your brain or memory within seconds. There's nothing to it. And we can completely get into that in a whole other video. I have very strong opinions about all that stuff, which I'm sure people have heard to death, but I've never really talked about it much myself. But I do have a lot to say on the subject matter, but we can check that later. Same thing. So trying to figure out what's kind of lined up as far as the staff goes. And her feet. Now, I wasn't going to spend like a ton of time on her legs and feet, but I do want to get enough of it in there that it doesn't look like it's completely ignored. So I'm just kind of roughing in some hands here. I didn't shoot any reference for these hands or anything. They're kind of just like, they're kind of my generic hands where I'm just trying to get in the base part of it, figure out where some of the knuckles are, where some of the fingers are, and then we can always tweak it later. I wanted part of her backhand going through the portal, so I was just kind of figuring out where that might be and what's working. Like I said, you can always shift stuff around. If it doesn't feel right, keep moving it, keep tweaking it. Stop, shoot, reference. Almost all of us have a camera in our pocket. Just shoot your hands real quick. Super, super easy. What I do is I usually shoot it on my camera, on my phone, email it to myself, and then I can pull it open and just have it up on my other monitor. Super, super easy. And this is same thing for the staff. I thought, we could have gone really complicated with it. A lot of like futuristic moving parts. I just give like a little kind of examples of tech on it and then really can just read as a simple thing. And then we did decide to start making her little bot friend. He was kind of ignored for a lot of the video. But I was like, let's just start figuring out some kind of geometric shapes for it. I think we could have went a lot of directions for the bot, and we still can. I'm not like, his design isn't fully fleshed out even by the end of it, but it really was just get the idea that we're just making something, we're kind of making it up as we go, and maybe there's some ideas that work, maybe there's some ideas that don't work. And that's always a great thing because it opens up discussion with other artists or anyone else around. And I think that's one thing I'm always trying to get going with any of my work, especially at Blizzard, is starting that conversation. Like, let's just get some paint marks down, get something rendered out, let's get it forward, and let's let that piece open up a whole box of brainstorming and dialogue. Did that juice any different ideas? What is working, what is completely not working? What's something we completely want to avoid in the future because it just stood out as not working so much? And so I always find getting some paint ideas over early, get them over often, just so it opens it all up, is always a great idea. That's why never be afraid of sending something over that you might think, this isn't like perfect, this isn't like rendered the best, this isn't the showcase of my ability. That's okay. It's I know it's easy to kind of get locked into it, but it's just to get the dialogue going and ideas going. But we're getting pretty close to the end here. I did 20 minutes of polish after recording, just gonna show the final. But I want to thank everyone so much for showing my process. I know my process can sometimes be a little chaotic, but I try to keep it as simple as possible as well. Y'all are super, super amazing. We're gonna start into some tutorials hopefully next week. And I'll leave you all here. And this will go to the final of this character. And I'm so glad we took this journey to think of someone completely new. All right. Thank you so much again. I'll see everybody in the next one.